Hey y'all, welcome back to US History class. This week we'll be introducing what happened during the Red Summer of 1919 and extending our learning on the Harlem Renaissance. Be sure to pause the video real quick and take a look at not only our agenda, but on the slides that have short descriptions of images that I want us to consider, okay? Let's start with the Red Summer of 1919. This is the period of time that stretched from the late winter to the early fall of 1919, in which there were several separate instances of racially motivated violence that took place all around the country. In the vast majority of these cases, these conflicts were initiated and perpetrated by mobs of white Americans, thus prompting a response from the African Americans in that city with self-defense. These anti-black crusades took place mostly in big cities in the Northeast and the Midwest, such as Detroit, Chicago, and a few years earlier in 1917 in East St. Louis, Illinois. Pause the video real quick and take a look at these images. Take note of anything that you might see or find interesting. We'll revisit this later. We must notice that most of these conflicts occurred in places where Black Americans had recently moved to during the Great Migration. As more and more Black Americans arrived in these cities, the white populations grew concerned that Black people would slowly and eventually take over their job opportunities because they offered cheap labor, and eventually take the identity of their cities. This anti-Black sentiment actually led to the largest number of KKK memberships that the US has ever seen, peaking in the early 1920s with numbers across the US anywhere between 3 to 8 million people. Acting on these feelings of animosity and fear, they went into Black neighborhoods, burned Black businesses and homes, murdered and lynched innocent Black Americans, and followed this destruction by reporting false news to the press, blaming the African Americans for the violence. The most disturbing conflict happened in the rural town of Elaine, Arkansas, where between 100 and 240 Black and 5 white Americans were killed, prompted by the false reporting that you can see here. Take a second to pause the lecture and read over the next couple of slides. Another devastating incident took place a few years later in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the white rioters attacked the famous business section of Tulsa known as Black Wall Street. This history that we're learning is often unfairly squished into one paragraph of textbooks. I say that this is unfair for the following reasons. Despite the social progress that this country has made, besides the movement against hatred and exclusion that we've seen as our nation, racism still persists in both glaring and sometimes really discreet forms. In 2012, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by someone outside of the law for quote-unquote looking suspicious. In 2014, 12-year-old Tamir Rice was shot and killed by Cleveland police when he was seen playing with a toy gun. In 2016, Philando Castile was shot and killed in his own vehicle after notifying a police officer that he had a firearm but was reaching for his driver's license. In 2018, Sacramento witnessed the shooting of Stephon Clark in the backyard of his grandmother's house with nothing but a cell phone on his person. The situations I recently mentioned are really different from the ones that happened in 1919. It's clear to see a certain connection between Black individuals being killed by white folks with the looming cloud of racism hanging about the situation. As we end this video, I'd like you to think about not only the complications that occurred and surround these situations, but think about what has changed in America regarding race relations, thinking in particular to African Americans. Secondly, although changes occurred and people are much more accepting and educated in today's society, I want you to think about how racist and exclusive ideas have been able to survive and manifest themselves in today's society. How do we see that still playing out? Consider starting a discussion on Google Classroom with your answer. That's it for right now, but be sure to watch our second video linking the message of the Harlem Renaissance to today. I'll see you then.